Levi.
Yes.
More important stuff.
Yes, it is.
Proverbs 2, 1 to 22. This is a lengthy poem about the getting of wisdom, and in Hebrew it's one single sentence. Very complicated sentence. Okay. Yes, please read. And we'll take it bit by bit. First of all, 1 to 4. And notice when son is addressed, it's the teacher of wisdom, the father, addressing his student, who is his son. Okay, go.
My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, and if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure.
Read verse 5 then too.
Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God.
Where does the getting of wisdom begin? It begins with listening to and meditating on the wise words of the teacher. So it has to do with meditation. And then more importantly than that, that leads to a realization you don't have wisdom and leads to prayer to God, asking God for the gift of wisdom. And the result of that is that the student understands the fear of the Lord. The student finds knowledge of God. How do you learn what fearing God is? By listening to and meditating on words of wisdom and praying for wisdom, understanding, insight. That gives you knowledge of God. Okay, keep going then.
For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds victory in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you.
Okay, now what happens then, if the student meditates on wise words, prays to God for wisdom, then God gives wisdom. He teaches wisdom, he speaks wisdom, and that wisdom gives that student victory, success in life, and protects that student from going the wrong way and stuffing things up. Protects the student quite practically, step by step on life, so he doesn't blow it all and muck up his life. Why will that happen? Because that student will understand what's right and wrong. He'll get a sharp conscience. Instead of just relying on somebody outside of himself to guide him, and even relying on his intellect to understand things, he will have as an inner compass with himself a sharp conscience, a true conscience. And that conscience will be the inner guide directing him step by step on life, to knowing what to avoid and knowing also what to embrace in life.
Discernment.
That's discernment, yes. Through conscience you get discernment of what's true or false, what's right or wrong. Why will this be the case? Because wisdom will enter his heart as the guide, and wisdom will save him from folly. Wisdom saves from folly. Now, let's find about the salvation that wisdom brings. Reading from verse 12 through to 22, please, Levi.
Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who leave the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. It will save you also from the adulteress, from the wayward wife with her seductive words, who has left the partner of her youth and ignored the covenant she made before God. For her house leads down to death, and her paths to the spirits of the dead. Now, who go None who go to her return or attain the paths of life. Thus you'll walk in the ways of good men, and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the unfaithful will be torn from it.
One of the biggest perils in life has to do in the whole, there's two different areas of life, is that you fall in with the wrong group of people. Right? And you get sucked into going the wrong way, the peer group, evildoers. But even more perilous than that is being sucked into sexual misbehaviour. Now, Miss Folly comes as an adulterous woman, a woman who promises life, and life being sexual enjoyment. She invites, the picture's inviting her to her house, and then anybody who enters her, that's a sexual euphemism, thinks that they are entering heaven, but little do they realise that they are entering the underworld. They become ghosts of what they once were. So what's it that protects you from getting involved with the wrong people, getting involved with the wrong woman in the wrong way? It's wisdom, and the wisdom of God. Now notice that wisdom here has much more to do with living than thinking. It has much more to do with morality than anything else. But it also has to do with theology, getting to know God. It's all interconnected. It comes back to that foundational stuff. If you're connected with God, trust in God, rely on God, fear God, you'll have wisdom. And wisdom then gives you the compass, the power to live wisely. And if you live wisely, you'll get wisdom. But if you live foolishly, all you'll get is folly. And wisdom is life-giving. What is folly? Death. Death-bringing. Now, all of you know that, and if you don't know that, directly from your own experience, look what's happening to many people of your generation. And my generation too. And in between. And I think the biggest fools are of the baby boomer generation, of which I'm an early precursor. Because if there's one thing that baby boomers lost all sense of, in my humble estimation, it's of wisdom. Simple wisdom of living. What's the secret of living a wise life? Now, all of it focuses on the figure of woman wisdom, Dame Wisdom. Let's have a look at the way she is presented and the way her opposite is presented. Who's next? David, can you go to chapter 4, 1 to 9? We get a description of what woman wisdom, Dame Wisdom, offers to her student.
Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. When I was a boy in my father's house, still tender and an only child of my mother, he taught me and said...
Just toss it there. So this is the teaching that the father has received from his father, who's received from his father. Okay, now I would have expected him to teach, do this, don't do this. Be a good boy, don't be a bad boy. But now notice what is the summary of the teaching that's handed down via the generation of old people, parents, in a community.
He taught me and said, lay hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands and you will live.
Now what are the commands? Go on.
Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or swerve from them. Do not forsake wisdom and she will protect you. Love her and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme, therefore get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Esteem her and she will exalt you. Embrace her and she will honor you. She will set a garland of grace on your head and present you with a crown of splendor.
Notice the sexual imagery here. What are the commands? Get wisdom. Acquire wisdom. And if you do that, you'll get understanding. The second command, don't forget my words, which is get wisdom. So thirdly, love wisdom, esteem wisdom, embrace wisdom. So get wisdom, love wisdom, esteem wisdom, and embrace wisdom. 4 basic commands. That's his teaching. Notice they all have to do with wisdom and the student's relationship to wisdom. And what does wisdom promise in turn then? She promises vitality and life. She promises protection from danger and disaster. And she promises to promote a student to a position of honour. She will honour you. She will exalt you. She will set a garland on your head. And what will she do? She will present you with a crown of splendour. Now the picture here, it changes. That first of all, wisdom is compared to a woman, a wife, and the imagery is sexual, but then it switches to a woman as a patron, like a queen, who likes a young man and therefore makes sure that he's successful. She becomes the patron of this young man, and he then gets a position of importance in the royal court. Notice the imagery here. So Dame Wisdom is the secret to all wisdom, and if you get her, you get everything that you could possibly want in life. Now lastly, and this is very, very important for the New Testament, you get the picture of wisdom as the mediator between God and humanity. Garth, can we go to chapter 8, verse 32? And I'd love to read the whole of chapter 8 to you, which is very important for Christology and the whole New Testament, but we'll have to stick with 8:32 through to 9 verse 6. Dave?
Now then, my sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways.
This is wisdom speaking.
Listen to my instructions and be wise. Do not ignore it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For whoever finds me finds life and receives favour from the Lord. But whoever fails to find me harms himself. All who hate me love death.
Just stop there. Wisdom stands between God and human beings. Those who find wisdom, those who love wisdom, receive God's favour. They receive life and they enjoy life. Those who reject wisdom, who hate wisdom, reject God's grace and favour, God's blessing, and they reject the gift of life. It's suicidal to reject wisdom. Now, the next passage, the beginning of the next one, you get wisdom, it's invitation. Now, I would expect wisdom, the wisdom to be presented as a teacher in a school classroom. How does wisdom, Dame Wisdom, teach wisdom? In a most unexpected way. Garth, can you go on?
Wisdom has built her house. She has
hewn. That's chopped out.
Its 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her maids, and she calls from the highest point of the city. Let all who are simple come in here. She says to those who lack judgment, come, eat my food, and drink the wine I have mixed. Live your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the ways of understanding.
Okay, what does wisdom invite her students to? Not to a lesson, not to a classroom, but a feast. And what kind of feast? What does she give to people in the banquet, the feast that she spreads for her students? Look at leave your simple ways and you will have life. She offers a feast of life. She really gives what Ms. Folly promises but doesn't deliver, which is a full life. The feast of life. Now this is very important for the New Testament because Jesus is the incarnation of wisdom, and it's particularly Luke's Gospel that presents Jesus as one who is involved in people's meals and who invites people to eat and drink together with him. The feast of wisdom, the life-giving meal of wisdom. Now, within the church, what's the life-giving meal of wisdom?
Holy Communion.
Holy Communion. Holy Communion is the place where we receive instruction in wisdom. Now that's strange, isn't it? A meal which teaches wisdom. That's the way wisdom works. Now, she has her counterpart, Ms. Folly. Let's go to her. Oh, Dylan, yes, you got the privilege of focusing on Ms. Folly. Chapter 9, 13 through to 18. And see if you can get the irony here. Notice that she mimics woman wisdom, Dame Wisdom.
Like Satan mimics Christ.
Yes, okay. Go on here, read it.
Right. The woman Folly is loud. She is undisciplined and without knowledge. She sits at the door of her house on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way.
Just stop there. So what's the picture of Miss Folly? She mimics wisdom, but she also presents herself. Who would sit there trying to accost men as they pass by, particularly young men? A prostitute. The picture here is of a prostitute, a soliciting custom. And what does she offer?
Let all who are simple come in here, she says to those who lack judgment. Stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of the grave.
Okay, now there's a lot of irony here. She invites the same people that wisdom invites, and it's out in public, just as wisdom's out in public. But what's her con? She says, stolen water is sweet and food eaten in secret is delicious. Now that's full of sexual euphemisms. Do you know what sexual euphemism is?
Innuendo.
Innuendo. So what's stolen water? What's the food eaten in secret, David?
Sex.
Sex. Yes, sexual intercourse. Come in. And she promises, notice, drink and food. She promises heaven, but read the last verse again. What do the people who become involved with her little realize?
Go to the grave.
Yeah, just read again, Dylan, the last verse. But whoever...
Little do they know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of the grave.
Now the dead are there is in Hebrew, the ghosts are there. She seems to invite to heaven. But what she does is leads them into the underworld so that they join the ghosts of the dead. Lovely little irony here.
Also, Lady Wisdom, she had servants, maidservants.
Yes.
And this girl's just by herself.
She just focuses on herself. Very attractive, but doesn't deliver. Now read the whole prologue and you get a whole composite picture both of woman wisdom, Dame Wisdom, and Miss Folly. We can't look at it entirely. Okay? Now, tying this up, what is the book of Proverbs? The book of Proverbs was used as a textbook in the wisdom schools. The first wisdom school was established by Solomon, and then they continued. So it is the theology of education. You know, if you want to know what Christian education should be in our schools, look at the book of Proverbs.
I know what I'm going to do for RE.
Okay. Now, what was the book of Proverbs used? It's the primary school curriculum. If I can just give you, the primary school curriculum is the book of Proverbs. The secondary curriculum is Ecclesiastes. The tertiary curriculum is the book of Job. What does it do? It teaches young men to read and write and think, and so prepares them for public life in community. But it also teaches young men how to get wisdom by leading a God-fearing life. So it gives them practical skills, but it also gives them life skills on the getting of wisdom. Any questions? David?
I don't know. It almost seems a bit unwise to have Ecclesiastes as the senior school.
The secondary one, we're all teenagers.
Most people just like focus on the things that are like, you know, live life and be merry, drink and be merry, and they just forget about the rest of the verses just because those ones are catchy, and they go out into life with that. Okay,
you'll find out how the Ecclesiastes engages with that.
Yeah, that's why it'd be good.
That's why it is so good.
Okay.
I wish I'd known more of Ecclesiastes when I was a high school teacher. I would have used it much more because it meets a chaplain for 11 years. Taught a lot of RE, particularly senior RE. I reckon that I could have engaged with grade 11 and 12 students very effectively by using Ecclesiastes, starting off where they were to subvert their secular mentality.
Also, it has other stuff in there that...
oh yes, you just wait, I won't go to Ecclesiastes yet. The tertiary curriculum, the book of Job, this is you. The book of Job, notice that it's not start-off stuff. It's not, you don't start off with Job, you end with Job. Because when it comes to wisdom, two things. First of all, what is the most important way in which we learn wisdom in life? It's through the experience of not just living, but what part of living? What? Making mistakes and suffering, that's the next thing. But the deepest wisdom doesn't come from suffering for mistakes that we made, but innocent suffering. Okay, one step further. That's the hardest of all. That the most important wisdom that we learn is when we suffer, not because of the mistakes we make, we learn wisdom from that, but the learning that comes as a result of suffering innocently. Now, suffering that you haven't brought on yourself because of your own stupidity, your folly. Secondly, if you're going to communicate wisdom to other people, foolish people, people who are trapped in the consequences of their folly, how can you best, and this is very important for you as pastors, how can you best communicate wisdom?
Having been in that situation?
Number one, you've got to be where they are. There's nothing more insufferable than a person who's not suffered. So unless you've been there, you'll have little credibility. But okay, what can you do to communicate wisdom to people who are in a mess, whose lives are in a mess? And you're going to be confronted by hundreds, thousands of people whose lives are in a mess. That's what being a pastor is.
You can listen.
Right, that's the starting point, but how do you communicate it? Yes, listening, yes?
That's what it's written.
If you show that you understand kind of where they're at, so you innately, without even saying anything, show that if someone is where they are, that's the end of the line.
Okay, that's part of it. And what will listening and being with people and understanding them lead to?
Gives them comfort.
It might give them comfort, yes, but how does that help them then to get out of it? Here we get, this is an unexpected book.
So this is...
Okay, let me give you the answer. Job starts off at the beginning of life as a God-fearing man, a person who teaches justice. He's a just man, he acts justly, he's an advocate for justice. At the end of his life, God changes him from a lawman, a justice man, to... Do you know? A mediator of his grace. God turns him into an intercessor. A person who prays.
Okay.
Okay? Now, what is God... What's the most important thing that God will be teaching you for the rest of your life?
To be an intercessor?
To be an intercessor. Okay? To be an intercessor for others. Not just to pray for yourself, for your own wisdom, but to intercede for other people in trouble. Now, that's the summary of the book. Now, I'll give you a bit of a diagram right at the beginning, because it is a complicated book. By universal acclaim, anybody who studied literature, world literature, would put the book of Job, quite apart from its theology, as one of the greatest pieces of literature ever written. Like Shakespeare's plays, Dante's great poems, Dante's Divine Comedy, and so on. The top 10 would always include the book of Job. If you go to Hebrew, it has some of the most superb poetry imaginable. My son-in-law's father was an agnostic, agnostic. Didn't believe in God, but he kept on reading and rereading Job. He read the Bible a lot, but of the Bible, the book of Job was the book that really fascinated him. And that's the story of many people in our society. Okay, now the book of Job, to make sense of the book of Job, you need to understand its structure. And this is a bit complicated. You all know the basic situation. Job starts off with life with everything. And then in very quick succession, he loses his goods, he loses his kids, and he almost loses his own life. So God draws his hand from him, and for no apparent reason, he suffers the worst things that any human being can suffer except loss of life. He ends up with a terrible skin disease which tortures him and stops him from sleeping. So he's lost all his goods, he's lost his kids, he loses control of his body.
He loses his wife too, doesn't he?
No, the wife part of the problem. She tells him to curse God, the silly old git. No, she doesn't leave him. She doesn't leave him. No, she doesn't.
I reckon our students.
Okay. Now, the first part of the book of Job is the prologue, telling the story of Job, which sets the scene. Just a few verses which summarize the most important part of the message of the prologue. Job, Psalms, Proverbs. Stephen, are you next, or is it... yes. Okay. Job chapter 1, 6 through to 10. Now, note this. This is the key here. There's a few things here that give us the key to the whole book. Please, Stephen.
One day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it."
Just stop there. The picture here is of Satan as a secret agent, as a prosecutor in the court of God. Satan means to accuse, to prosecute somebody. Satan in Hebrew means accuser. So Satan goes around snooping to find out what's wrong with people so that he can accuse people before God. And he's fastened on Job. Keep on going. 8 through to 12.
The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then. Everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord.
Now, it's very important that you see exactly what happens. This is the hidden dimension of what's going on. God calls Satan's attention to Job. Why? Because Job is a model of what it means to fear God. He fears God, shuns evil. As far as God's concerned, Of all human beings living then, who is the ideal human being?
Job.
Job. And there's nothing wrong with Job as far as God's concerned. Now, Satan, who's the ultimate cynic, says, oh, you've got to be kidding. Now, what's Satan's cynicism? Job only fears and trusts in God. Why?
Because God's given all
Because God has given him all the blessings. So he clings to God for what he can get from God. With me? Notice the cynicism says, okay, of course he is loyal to you. Why? Because you've given him such a good deal. But then he goes on to say, I bet you, if you take everything from him, then
He'll curse you.
he'll curse you. And God says, God has such confidence, and notice this is important, God has such confidence in Job that he says to Satan, okay, you can take everything from him except his life. Now the key phrase is, does Job fear God for nothing? Does Job fear God for nothing? The query is, does Job fear God for his own sake, for nothing, or only for what he can get from God?
Yep.
Right, you got it? And, okay, then Satan's left loose. Then the story's picked up again in chapter 2, 1-6. Stephen, can you read that too, to keep the two things together?
On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason.
Now, just stop there. Notice God says, you incited him to ruin him without any reason. So there's no reason for God to punish Job. He's done nothing wrong. God agrees that he is a person of integrity. He has a good conscience before God. Now, notice Satan's cynicism and see if you can work out what Satan's getting at here.
Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life. But stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life.
Now what Satan's argument says, okay, yeah, I grant you that Job doesn't fear you because of what he can get out of you, but as long as you don't touch him, he's happy. It doesn't matter what you do to other people, as long as you don't touch number one. Okay, you get the basic argument? You can touch everything else he has, but if you touch him, if you attack him in some way, then he will curse you. And then what happens is that Satan brings it on that Job has this terrible, terrible skin disease that tortures him. He's got a scratch, and he goes to the rubbish dump where there's ashes from the fire, and the only way he can soothe the terrible pain is by rubbing ashes on it to neutralize the pain. And his wife gets stuck to him and says he should curse God and die.
You're right, she
Yes.
doesn't believe me.
I have two questions that I really want to ask, but I don't blame you if you can't answer them. It said that Satan came into the presence of God.
Yeah.
And isn't he like evil? So
Yep.
How could you come into the presence of God without being destroyed?
Yep.
okay. The other one's
Next question.
the other one's just as silly.
No, it's not silly.
Okay.
No, silly.
The other one is why did God ask Satan, where have you come from, when he would have known the answer anyway?
Okay. And that's not a silly question, but it's a fairly straightforward one.
Courtesy.
It's courtesy. You know what you've been doing. Have you? You know, because have you discovered anybody? And he wants to know whether he's been down there, and he wants to engage him in conversation. Why does he want to ask that question? To ask them the question, have you You know, you've been down there looking around. Have you checked out Job? And it's quite obvious he checked him out, but he hasn't been able to find anything to hold against him, to accuse him. In answer to the first question, go to the book of Revelation, chapter 11, or is it 13? And you'll get the reverse side of that. Chapter 12 it is, but I won't look at it now. Now, then something follows. Job is there suffering, and his 3 best friends come to visit him.
Good on him.
And they do a good job for 7 days. For 7 days and 7 nights, they stay with Job and they don't say a jolly thing, which is more than I've ever done with anybody. Before we start blaming his friends because of the way they've stuffed things up, remember that they stayed with Job for 7 days, 7 nights, and just were with him and listened to him. But the end of those 7 days and 7 nights, Job doesn't end up cursing God, but he curses the day he was born. In other words, he wishes he was dead, or he'd never been born, in fact.
Stillborn.
A stillborn child. And this then annoys his friends because they think it's blasphemy against God. And then you have 3 rounds of speeches. And the basic argument that they present are 2 kinds of arguments. Number 1, their argument is, you are suffering,
Done something wrong.
you must have done something wrong, therefore God's punishing you for what you've done wrong. What have you done wrong? So that you punish. Now, why are they so eager to push this line? Because they want to reverse it for themselves. They aren't suffering, therefore what?
They're good.
They are good, okay, because they don't want to be where Job is. So they bring their own agenda into the argument. You are suffering. People who do wrong suffer the consequences of their action. That's the first argument. The second argument follows on from that. Even if you don't know, Job kept on maintaining that, okay, he's prepared to grant that evil leads to suffering. But what's his problem?
He hasn't done anything.
He hasn't done anything evil. And so he keeps on challenging and say, show me what I've done wrong. And their second argument is, okay, human beings are ignorant, and therefore the wise thing to do is what? Repent.
Of the sin that you don't know.
Well, you don't know that you've committed, and come to God and make up to God and ask God to forgive you. That's their second argument. And Job says, no, that's playing games. I can't repent unless I know what I have to repent of. Now, you get the 3 friends, and there are 3 rounds of argument between friends and Job. And the last round, interestingly, the final friend, Zophar, is silenced, and they have nothing more to argue. Now, there's something funny going on here. These guys come in order to comfort Job, but what do they end up doing?
Accusing him.
Accusing him. And who are they therefore siding with?
Satan.
They think they're siding with God, but in fact they are siding with Satan. Now watch out. That's the basic peril of you as pastors and theological students in pastoral care. I reckon that this book of Job is the best handbook on pastoral care that I know. The danger is you've learnt your theology and you use your theology to do what?
Fix the problem. Or try to. Well, accuse.
What?
Explain.
Explain people's suffering. You want to explain it, but what do people hear it as? Accusation. And in fact, that's what you're doing. And without realizing it, who are you siding with? You think you're siding with God and doing God's work, but you are siding with Satan, the accuser, and doing his work. The speeches end then with Job being frustrated and he turns his back on them, and he confronts God, he challenges God by swearing an oath of innocence. And this way challenging God. Let's have a look at that oath of innocence in which Job tries to clear the deck before God, challenging God to act. Chapter 27, 1 through to 10, please, Tony. I will interrupt at a couple of places. Now, the beginning there, as surely as God lives, is the way in Hebrew you do an oath, where we would say, I swear by Almighty God that, they would say, as surely as God lives, which means by the life of God, I swear that. This is oath formula. Tony, can you read?
And Job continued his discourse. As surely as God lives, who has denied me justice? The Almighty, who has made me taste bitterness of soul. As long as I have life within me, the breath of God in my nostrils, my lips will not speak wickedness, and my tongue will utter no deceit. I will never admit you are in the right till I die. I will not deny my integrity. I will maintain my righteousness and never let go of it. My conscience will reproach me as long as my conscience will not reproach me as long as I live.
Notice here, he basically swears, look, I am innocent. And not only that, then he brings a curse on himself. Verse 7 to 10.
May my enemies be like the wicked, my adversaries like the unjust. For what hope has the godless when he is cut off, when God takes away his life? Does God listen to his cry when distress comes upon him? Will he find delight in the Almighty? Will he call upon God at all times?
Okay, that's what I find. There's two things that Job does here, is that he swears that he is innocent and that he will always maintain his innocence. Now, if he is not innocent, then what will happen since he's sworn?
He'll die.
He'll die. Secondly, then, he says, may the wicked ones, you have plural there, but in Hebrew you have a singular. Can you just correct that? May my enemy be like the wicked, and my adversary like the unjust. He brings a curse upon his enemy, his accuser, his adversary.
Might be Satan.
God is.
Who is it?
Satan.
Okay, but no, it's deeper than that. Who are the ones who are in fact accusing him?
His friends.
His friends. So his curse will come upon his friends if they are unjust, untrue. Now, you won't understand what follows unless you see that there's a problem here, because that curse comes upon who? Not on Job, but on his friends. And at the end of the story, he needs to intercede for his friends. Then this is followed by a poem which has nothing to do with Job, but it's an editorial insertion, a poem in praise of God's hidden wisdom. God's wisdom which is hidden, and that human beings can't see. And in this book, how is God's wisdom hidden? It's hidden in the sufferings of Job. Instead of Job's sufferings contradicting God's wisdom, they reveal God's wisdom in a strange way. I better stop there. The first period next week we'll be finishing Job, and then we will deal with Ruth, Song of Songs and Ruth. I'll try and get both those three things done.
So is the reason they put plural enemies there, is that because it was referring to his friends?
Yes, because it's an exegetical marker to clue in, look in the future, Job's enemy, Job's adversary, is not Satan, really, but is his friends. Notice his friends have become his enemies.